saying that he's now learned from his own personal investigation while reviewing intelligence reports himself. And, of course, he is chair of the House Intelligence Committee. So he's looking through intelligence reports, and he sees that there was information collected about the Trump transition team. He says it looks like it was done incidentally and legally, but he says, I'm actually alarmed by it. He should be. And at the same time, we have this other report at Infowars.com where the Department of Justice was had found falsely planted malware at Trump Tower that was designed to mimic ties to Russia. So we see that, yes, in fact, as we reported earlier in the week, we had this Project Dragnet and other things that showed that we had addresses of Donald Trump's quite some time ago. Many of his employees were being surveilled. We now know that they have collected this based on the House Intelligence Committee chairman. And we also see that they put software on to frame Donald Trump and other people to make it look as though they're talking to the Russians. Your comments on this?
Busted. I mean, for the last 2 weeks, the heads of the various agencies in the deep state have vehemently denied that there was any surveillance of Trump Tower. I have repeatedly urged the president not to back off. Meanwhile, his weak-kneed advisors, Sean Spicer and Reince Priebus, have been trying to convince him to walk it back, just apologize to Obama. Wrong. Thanks to InfoWars, we now know that surveillance of Donald Trump started much earlier than we thought. They began having his phone calls in New York and Florida monitored under the Bush administration, and that continued into the Obama administration. Now, Chairman Nunes has learned that they weren't spying on candidate for President Trump. They were spying on President Trump.
Yes.
Because they were spying on the transition offices. Yeah. I know from myself, David, that based on a New York Times story of January 20th, 1917, that the FBI was wiretapping me, was monitoring my phone calls, which means they were listening to my phone calls with candidate Donald Trump.
You know, Roger, I put up a report again because it was, I think, 3 years old. I put it up on my YouTube channel because Michael Hayden, former director of the NSA and the CIA, went to Washington Lee University, and he was talking to the law students there. And he said, we don't listen to bad people. We listen to interesting people. Yeah. Who would be more interesting than the president-elect for these people to listen to? And he also bragged, Roger, about the fact that he didn't need the Patriot Act. He didn't need a special section of the Patriot Act. He had a direct order from the president. And he said that as he pointed to his chest. That is a recipe for dictatorship. Well, and that is precisely what we're seeing here is dictatorship and coup foundation.
The fact that we even know about this program, Blockbuster Story, written by Dr. Jerry Corsi, is because a disgruntled and disillusioned CIA agent who realized that this was all unconstitutional and highly illegal became a whistleblower.
Yes.
In this particular case, as I said to you earlier today, and also yesterday, this is a slow motion coup. The Ministry of Truth, the National Censorship Board that will decide what can and cannot be said, is step one of the proposed, I should say planned, Trump takedown.
And just as we see, there's multiple aspects of this, as we see that they're listening to Trump, but then they're also planting stuff to frame him. That is what this Ministry of Truth is about. They're going to control the narrative, but then they're also going to apply and allege collusion to people as well. Stay with us. We're going to have Roger Stone taking over the fourth hour of the broadcast. We'll be right back.
To Infowars.com, I'm sitting in for public enemy number one of the deep state. That would be Alex Jones. We now nakedly see the attempt to frame him, claiming that he was in league with the Russians, that the Russians were expending millions in bots to take, presumably, feeds from Infowars.com and spread them to the world. This is a damnable lie. In terms of exposure, I wish we were that lucky. But Infowars is the tip of the spear, folks. They've got to take Infowars down first because we are the ones telling you about the surveillance of the President of the United States. We are the ones exposing the small-time Joe McCarthy's on the House Intelligence Committee. We are the ones exposing the corruption and the greed of John and Tony Podesta and their patrons, Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton. So please go to the Infowars.com store. Now, there's a lot of fine products, but I want to recommend one that my wife thinks is particularly effective. That is their blue toothpaste, which is the Super Blue Fluoride. She absolutely swears by this product. She has a much, much better smile than mine. I'm afraid an occasional cigar and a heavy addiction to espresso, make mine a quadruple, please, has stained my teeth. I find that I get some assistance, but her teeth gleam. I have seen the product reports on this. The feedback is amazing. Many, many, many testimonials. So if you want to have a winning smile, a Ronald Reagan type smile, a Donald Trump type smile, get your Super Blue Fluoride toothpaste now. It's back in stock, so I'd move quickly. If any of you saw the House Intelligence Committee meeting this week, it was a veritable kangaroo court. I don't know how many small clowns they could have stuffed in this car. I saw Representative Adam Schiff and Representative Eric Swalwell acting as demagogues, engaging in red baiting, fear-mongering, the worst form of distortion, half-truths, and in some cases, no truths. I had to go through the transcripts because I couldn't believe how egregious so much of this was. Let's go to page 1. Mr. Schiff to Mr. Comey, are you familiar, pardon me, do you know who Roger Stone is? Director Comey, generally, yes. Are you aware that he is a partner of Paul Manafort? Thank you for the guilt by association. Paul Manafort is formally accused of nothing and served Donald Trump's campaign with distinction. Going to the second page, Mr. Comey says, Mr. Stone acknowledged Mr. Podesta's time in the barrel was coming in August of 2016, which would have been prior to the public release of the stolen emails by WikiLeaks of Mr. Podesta's. Do you know how Mr. Stone would have known that Mr. Podesta's emails were going to be leaked? Listen here, numbnuts. I never said I knew in advance. I had already seen an incredible memo by Dr. Jerome Corsi on the massive corruption of Tony and John. I knew that there were a number of investigative journalists working on this, their connections to organized crime. I would write my own piece on this in October, which took longer. Today, if you go online, there's a piece that says Stone's alibi falls apart because some of the facts in that piece came from WikiLeaks. Yes, they had been published months before. Extraneous, irrelevant. Brock, you need better writers. If you see any bot telling you that my alibi has fallen apart, please, members of the House committee, invite me. I'll be happy to bitch slap all of you in public because you have defamed me. Mr. Swalwell says that if I am called to testify, I will lie. That's defamatory. Waive your congressional immunity, Congressman. Let's let a federal judge and jury decide whether you are telling the truth. Again, Mr. Schiff says that Mr. Stone was in touch with the Russian hacker Crucifer 2.0 and subsequently wrote an article about Crucifer's role in the hack of DNC documents. Wrong, numbnuts. I wrote the article substantially before the brief, now fully disclosed exchange with a man alleged by the people who just said the president wasn't, Trump Tower wasn't under surveillance. We just learned it is. Alleged by those people to be a Russian asset. Just because the boys in Langley say something is true does not make it true. So any inference that my now entirely public exchange with Crucifer 2.0 constitutes collusion is disproved by the content, by the facts, and by the timeline. There is no proof of collusion. I did write an article on Breitbart for August 15th, I believe it was, or pardon me, August 5th, that outlined the role of Crucifer 2.0. I was unaware of allegations, and that's what they are, that he is a Russian asset. That makes my conversation, beyond being banal, it also makes it unwitting. You know, they say, well, Roger Stone, you're a dirty trickster. You know, politics ain't beanbag, and I am certainly prepared to use sharp elbows to win. But there's one trick that is not in my bag of tricks. That's treason. And the implication that because I am not for war with Syria, and because I think Hillary and Bill Clinton are epically corrupt, and I applaud the fact that Julian Assange, who does not work for the Russians, Congressman, exposed their corruption, that does not constitute a crime. Now, I know that I have personally been wiretapped. Page 1 of the New York Times, January 20th. Wiretap data used in inquiry of Trump aides. On what evidence? On what probable cause? A Hillary Clinton press release? Certainly not because of my exchange with Crucifer 2.0, because since the folks at the FBI have already been in my Twitter feed, they know when they leak this story to the smoking gun in violation of federal law that it's a canard. They're already aware of that. Numerous other incidental details of my personal and business life appear in both the New York Times and in the smoking gun. If the surveillance was done on me on the basis of a FISA court warrant, I should say, secret FISA court warrant, well, then the leaking of that information constitutes a felony. I have committed no felonies, but those who are accusing me, they have committed multiple felonies. Now, as for this entire question, the Congressman James Himes from Connecticut, my native state, says that Roger Stone and Manafort are high on the list of those who should be called. Amen, brother. Let's have an open hearing in the public so we can go through Mr. Schiff's words, sentence by sentence, and dissect them. And let's go to the true historical record. There is no evidence of collusion here. It is part and parcel of the plan to bring down the president. You see, the deep state has to rationalize their surveillance of Donald Trump. And they do so by creating this fake Russian narrative. And then when you seek to dispute it, they use their technological crackdown of censorship to stop you from having your side of the story aired. This is precisely what the Ministry of Truth Censor Board, signed into law by Barack Obama in 2017, was created for. It is not ironic that Bush family operative Rob Portman, senator from Ohio, is the sponsor of this Big Brother program that allows the entire widespread censorship and violation of our constitutional First Amendment rights. Believe me, silencing those who would fight is the first step in the silent coup that is planned to take out our new president. They have now been caught red-handed spying on him, bugging him. I know my calls again with him were recorded. We now know they were monitoring Trump Tower. If you want to get the facts on this, by the way, you don't have to wait for the congressional hearings if they have the cojones to invite me. You can go right now to the InfoWars store and get The Making of the President 2016 by Roger Stone. I address the story of John Podesta. I address what I knew about the WikiLeaks. I address the entire fraudulent, corrupt, fetid Russian lie. Thanks for joining us here at InfoWars. I'll be right. Hi, I'm Roger Stone, sitting in for the Revolution's MVP, Alex Jones. Alex has recently been targeted by the deep state, along with yours truly, in the effort to stop free speech and for us to bring you the very latest news about the deep state's efforts to undermine the democratically elected president of the United States, Donald Trump. Donald Trump tweeted over a week ago that he had been the subject of surveillance at Trump Tower. He was ridiculed across the board by mainstream media. Now the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee tells us that Trump was right. Tip of the iceberg, folks. As I told Charlie Rose on CBS yesterday, took over a year for the Watergate cover-up to unravel. Nixon's men denied everything also, but ultimately the facts became known. The facts on the efforts to spy on President Trump, President-elect Trump, not candidate Trump, have now, in the last few hours, come to light. This just in, David Brock has reportedly suffered a major heart attack. It is one of two things, in my opinion. The multiple crimes and the millions he owes the IRS from tax evasion is weighing on him. Perhaps he has heard from the Trump Justice Department based on the public complaints against him filed with the Federal Election Commission. He is clearly guilty of numerous transgressions in 2016, but there's one other possibility. He could have been poisoned with a poison made to look like a heart attack by George Soros, who's very angry about the fact that he gave David Brock $30 or $40 million, and Mr. Brock has nothing whatsoever to show for it. Also, big news, the MSNBC is reporting that my former partner, Paul Manafort, worked for a Russian billionaire named, let me get this exactly right, Deripaska, I believe is Oleg Deripaska. What seems to be missing from the MSNBC story is the fact that John and Tony Podesta worked for Mr. Deripaska, except for their contracts and payments were far, far larger than those paid to Paul Manafort. Mr. Manafort has said today publicly that he had no role in lobbying the federal government, and this appears to be part and parcel of this smear to prop up the notion that the Trump campaign was involved with nefarious characters in Eastern Europe. More on this story from Mr. Manafort, I assure you. At the White House, we have had, as I indicated earlier, weak-kneed establishment Republican aides urging the president to apologize or back down for his claim that he was under surveillance. The president has now been proven right. They have been proven to be the weak-kneed sisters that we had prophesized. The man to watch inside the Trump White House, though, to watch very carefully, would be economic advisor Gary Cohn. Mr. Cohn has been very aggressively pushing the president to support a carbon tax. A terrible idea. But the giant and most, the largest beneficiary of this carbon tax, ironically, would be Goldman Sachs, the previous employer for liberal Democrat Cohen, who is Donald Trump's chief economic advisor. I think Donald Trump had the most dynamic, exciting economic proposal of any presidential candidate in this race. It involved a cut in the corporate tax rate below that of Mexico and China, which would bring companies back to the U.S. to create jobs here, to hire here, to expand here. It included inversion, a program to bring dollars back into the country for fair taxation, almost $2 trillion that is sitting offshore or more. And of course, an across the board John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan style tax cut. Please, Mr. Cohen, would you focus on that agenda and forget the carbon tax that would be so lucrative for your previous employer? Stay with us here at Infowars.com. And